Have you ever found yourself alone on a long stretch of highway? The hum of the engine your only companion as you race against time. That was General Samantha Voss's world that morning. Setting out from Lake Charles just before dawn, she slipped into the driver's seat of an unremarkable rental sedan, no flashing lights, no escort, just her and a secure military handset pressed into her jacket pocket. The Louisiana countryside rolled by in muted shades of green and gold, cypress-lined bias giving way to quiet towns where the only signs of life were early risers heading to work or church. Samantha kept her eyes on the road, but her mind was already halfway across the country. By mid-morning, she would have to brief senior leaders at the Pentagon on sensitive troop movements, then race onward to a top-secret strategy session at Barksdale Air Force Base. There was no margin for error. Every second counted, and every word she spoke on that secure line would shape decisions at the highest levels. Yet she drove alone, trusting that discretion and speed mattered more than a rolling motorcade. As the miles ticked off the odometer, -100, 150, 200, she monitored her phone's signal bars with quiet concern. The open road offered few guarantees of reception, and she knew that once she crossed into the narrow gaps between cell towers, her link to Washington could disappear in an instant. Still, she pressed on, hands steady at 10 and 2, heart steady beneath the weight of duty. In a life filled with orders and ceremonies, it was moments like these, just a general, her thoughts, and the endless highway that tested her resolve most of all. By the time Shreveport's skyline emerged on the horizon, Samantha Voss was ready, mind sharp, purpose clear, and the Pentagon waiting to hear her voice. Pulling off Highway 131, General Samantha Voss's eyes flicked to her secure phone, 2 bars, then 1. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple as she scanned the roadside, and there it was. Kelly's Fuel Food, its peeling sign swaying in the Louisiana breeze. She eased the rental sedan into a cracked space away from the pumps, heart pounding not from speed but urgency. Without pausing to lock the door, Samantha slipped out, the humid air wrapping around her like a damp blanket. The little station was quieter than she expected. A handful of locals leaned against pickup trucks, wiping sweat from their brows and swapping quiet stories beneath the tin awning. Samantha avoided the group and moved to the far corner of the lot, careful to keep her stomach plain denim jeans, a loose jacket, baseball cap low blending in as much as possible. She lifted the phone to her ear, voice low but steady. General Voss verifying identity, ready to receive briefing. Inside, she could hear the operator's soft click, and then that familiar, crisp tone confirmed, "Mom. Begin transmission." Instantly, sensitive orders poured through the line, real-time trooper routes, encrypted directives, timeline adjustments. Samantha's eyes never left the station's aging roofline and rusty pump handles. Her training had taught her to stay alert to surroundings even when lost in command chatter. Every so often she caught a wary glance from a couple of men filling tanks, but they quickly turned away, uninterested or unnerved by the sight of a woman so focused at a rural pit stop. Samantha tucked a loose twist behind her ear and refocused on the call. Each tick of the second hand felt monumental. Every instruction she relayed would ripple from Shreveport all the way to the Pentagon. By the time the briefing concluded, her shoulders were tense but her mission intact. She nodded once, half to herself, half in respect to those on the other end, and clicked off the secure line. With renewed purpose, she squared her shoulders, slid back into the driver's seat, and set her course for Barksdale Air Force Base, knowing that every mile now mattered more than ever. Linda Forsythe wiped her hands on a faded dish towel as General Voss stepped away from the pumps. At 55, Linda had spent more years behind this counter than she cared to count. She knew every face that drifted through Kelly's Fuel Food. Today's visitor, though jeans, sneakers, baseball cap pulled low, felt different. There was a quiet intensity about her, a purpose in the way she held herself, even as she spoke into her phone. Linda's eyes narrowed behind the counter's plexiglass, tracing each precise movement. She watched Samantha lean against her rental car, lips moving in soft, rapid bursts. What could require such secrecy at a run-of-the-mill gas station? Linda's curiosity flipped into unease. She glanced at the station clock, mid-afternoon, time for routine. Yet here was a stranger, not simply filling up but commanding the lot with her stillness. Something about her didn't add up. Leaning toward the old rotary telephone on the wall, Linda picked up the receiver with a practiced ease. She spoke in a low voice, careful that no customer at the front register would catch her words. "Dispatch, this is Kelly's Fuel. We've got a suspicious woman by the pumps, appears to be on a secure line or something. Could be trouble, she said, letting the warning hang in the humid air. She tapped her fingers against the wood paneling, listening as the clerk on the other end confirmed the call. As she hung up, Linda straightened her bun and smoothed her blouse. She returned to her post, feigning concentration over the cash register while covertly watching Samantha's reflection in the glass doors. In Linda's mind, she'd done her civic duty. After all, Mosswood hadn't seen a real emergency in years. Better safe than sorry, she told herself. And in that quiet suspicion, Linda set forces in motion that would change everyone's afternoon and Samantha Voss's mission forever. 2 cruisers barreled onto Kelly's dusty lot, lights flashing and engines rumbling, an unmistakable sign that Mosswood's finest had arrived. Officer David Rhodes, 35, stood tall with a buzzcut and broad shoulders that filled out his uniform. Beside him, Officer Alex Monroe, 28, lanky and eager, slid on mirrored sunglasses and offered Rhodes a lopsided grin. Both men had answered Linda's tip with more enthusiasm than most weekdays' calls for stray dogs or busted taillights. Rhodes killed the engine first, then stepped out with deliberate confidence, his polished boots clicking on the gravel. Monroe followed briskly, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet, as if the mere sight of a suspicious stranger meant a break from small-town boredom. They moved in unison toward Samantha's car, where she still held her secure phone against her ear, oblivious to the approaching storm. License and registration, Rhodes barked before Samantha even hung up. His tone brooked no argument. Monroe leaned against the hood, arms crossed, scanning her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "What brings you to Mosswood today, Mom?" he added, voice dripping with false politeness. Samantha lifted her head, calm and collected. She placed the phone on her car's roof, hands open and visible. "Good afternoon, officers. I'm on official military business," she replied, voice steady as the Louisiana heat. She reached slowly for her wallet, drawing out her Army credentials and federal travel orders. Rhodes snatched the papers with a dismissive flick. He barely glanced, smirk playing on his lips. "This is fake," he declared, tossing her ID onto the hood like discarded paper. Monroe chuckled, mocking her rank. "Expecting us to believe you're some 4-star general," he jeered. Around them, the few locals at the pumps paused, phones popping out to record the confrontation. Samantha's calm facade didn't waver, but inside she braced herself. In a quiet town unused to real scrutiny, 2 officers were about to learn the hard way that their routine stop had just met someone who wouldn't be intimidated. Just as General Voss began to present her credentials, Rhodes' skepticism flared into action. In one swift motion, he snapped a pair of handcuffs around her wrists, cold steel biting into the smooth fabric of her jacket. Monroe yanked her arm, disdain twisting his features as he hauled her toward the rental car. Samantha's calm composure wavered only for a heartbeat. Then she drew in a steady breath and called out, "Gentlemen, I am an active duty 4-star general of the United States Rhodes Army." Her words were met with a dismissive scoff. Rhodes shoved her lightly against the doorframe, its vinyl cracking under the impact, and Monroe reached for the secure phone tucked in her jacket pocket, ripping it free and silencing the transmission mid-briefing. The Pentagon staff's last words, a frantic call of her name, faded into static. Samantha pressed her lips together, refusing to show fear even as the cuffs tightened. "Your paperwork's a fake," Rhodes declared, tossing her orders onto the hood. Monroe brayed with laughter, the 2 of them exchanging a victorious glance. Samantha raised her chin, voice measured but firm. "You have my credentials. You have my travel orders. You have my rank." Each phrase landed like a challenge that hung heavy in the Louisiana heat. But the officers would not relent. They guided her, cuffed and silent, into the back seat of the rental, metal doors shutting with a final click. Samantha knew the law granted her immunity on official business. Yet here, in this dusty lot, her authority counted for nothing. As the car door slammed, she pressed her forehead against the window and vowed silently that this injustice would not go unanswered. Across the marble expanse of the Pentagon's Operations Center, Lieutenant Commander Justin Carver sat surrounded by banks of glowing monitors. At 42, Justin had logged more late nights here than he cared to admit, tracking deployments, verifying secure channels, and ensuring nothing fell through the cracks. This evening, however, something was unmistakably off. The normally crisp military-grade audio feed from General Voss's secure line had sputtered, dropping into static just as she began transmitting. Justin's hand hovered over the headset controls as he replayed the last clear seconds, muffled voices, a sudden scuffle, then silence. He exchanged a look with his supervisor, Colonel Jacqueline, Alex Rupp. At 45, Jacqueline embodied calm decisiveness, her years of strategic planning visible in the slight crease between her eyes. Without a word, she strode to Justin's console, her boots echoing across the polished floor. "Patch in the locator," Jacqueline instructed, voice steady. Justin typed rapidly. On one screen, a map sprang to life, dots and grids revealing signal strength across the region. Only one flickered with distress. A faint but distinct ping mere miles from Shreveport, pinpointed to the rural crossroads of Mosswood, Louisiana. Jacqueline's expression remained unreadable for a heartbeat before she pressed her lips together. "That's where she stopped," she said quietly. Justin nodded and dispatched an encrypted message to the Barksdale Air Force Base security detail with coordinates and a terse update. Possible interference. Confirm General Voss's status and secure location immediately. Within moments, the operations center hummed with renewed urgency. Technicians summoned satellite uplinks while Jacqueline personally coordinated with the Joint Airborne Group. Justin took a deep breath, fingers poised over the comms panel. Even in this fortress of protocol and precision, the uncertainty of those lost seconds weighed heavily. Yet as the convoy of black SUVs from Barksdale roared to life, both officers knew their training would carry them through. In the hush of the Pentagon's nerve center, Justin and Jacqueline prepared to transform alarm into action, ready to restore the line and bring their commander home. A squadron of sleek black SUVs roared onto Kelly's cracked pavement, trumping gravel beneath their heavy tires. At the lead window, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Drake, 44, jaw set with iron resolve, peered out and gave a curt salute to his driver. He stepped out onto the sun-baked lot, crisp folder tucked under one arm, boots clicking with military precision. Linda Forsyth, still watching from the doorway, blinked in surprise as Drake strode past her toward the Mosswood officers. Sergeant Rhodes and Officer Monroe straightened in ill-fitting uniforms, glancing first at the new arrivals, then at the handcuffed figure on the curb. Rhodes opened his mouth to bark an order, but Drake raised a single finger and the world seemed to hush. "Stand down," Drake said, voice low but crackling with authority. His eyes swept over the local cops, then locked onto the paper in Rhodes' hand. "You are ordered to release General Voss immediately and remove your badges." He paused, letting the weight of his rank settle like a stone in the sultry air. "Both of you are suspended pending a full federal investigation. Any further action on your part will be considered obstruction of justice." Rhodes' face paled, Monroe's smug grin vanished in an instant. Drake nodded to two Air Force security officers at his flank. They moved in silently, cuff key and handcuff pouch in hand. Within seconds, Samantha Voss was free, the cuffs slipping away with a soft click that felt almost lyrical against the earlier chaos. Linda stepped back, jaw slack, as Samantha rose, brushing dust from her jacket. Drake offered her an aide-de-camp salute. "Ma'am," he said, voice respectful. "Are you hurt?" Samantha shook her head, dignity restored. "Minor scrapes," she replied. As the convoy formed a protective circle around her, the SUV's engines rumbled back to life. Drake climbed in beside her, folder already open. "Let's get you back," he said. And with that they departed, leaving behind a lot forever changed by the swift justice of Barksdale security. Within hours of her forcible handcuffing and shove against the gas station wall, grainy cell phone footage of General Samantha Voss's arrest exploded across every social media feed in America. Viewers winced as two Mosswood officers manhandled a calm, uniformed woman who had simply identified herself as a four-star general on official business. Alex Resin retweets multiplied by the minute, each post accompanied by shock and outrage. How could this happen to a decorated military leader? And this is the deepest kind of injustice. National news programs cut into regular schedules to broadcast the raw clip, no carefully edited sound bites, just the unmistakable clang of handcuffs and a silent gasp as she was pushed against the rental car. Morning talk show panels, once consumed with lighter fare, invited retired generals, civil rights lawyers, and veteran advocates to condemn what many called a clear case of racial profiling and abuse of authority. The NAACP released a C. Rhodes meant, decrying the humiliation heaped upon a woman who has dedicated her life to serving our country, and the ACLU filed a public records request demanding the Mosswood Police Department's entire disciplinary file. Even in Baton Rouge, the governor's office could no longer remain neutral. "I expect a full accounting," he declared at an impromptu press conference, promising that Louisiana would cooperate with any federal inquiry. U.S. senators and representatives from both sides of the aisle demanded the Department of Justice open an immediate civil rights investigation. Meanwhile, veterans organizations, typically hesitant to wade into contemporary controversies, publicly supported Voss, emphasizing that no one in uniform should be treated this way. By day's end, the Mosswood Police Department had launched its own internal review and placed the two officers on administrative leave. But the broader reckoning had only just begun. Across the nation, people took to the streets in peaceful vigils, holding smartphones aloft as both cameras and symbols of accountability, a reminder that in the digital age, injustice can no longer hide in plain sight. General Voss arrived at the podium just before noon, the Louisiana sun glinting off her full-dress blues. Rows of reporters, their cameras and microphones poised like silent sentinels, focused on her every movement. With every step, her polished metals caught the light, reminding everyone present that she had earned her rank through decades of service. She paused, scanning the assembled crowd, local journalists, federal agents, even a handful of Mosswood residents drawn by curiosity and concern. Then, in a voice both firm and compassionate, she began, "Today we gathered not to relive an injustice, but to confront it." Her words carried across the hush, resonating deeper than any shouted protest. "You watched a 4-star general handcuffed in a small-town gas station," she said, pausing to let the gravity settle. "What you saw was not an isolated mistake, but a symbol of a broader failure to recognize one another's dignity." Cameras clicked as she spoke of responsibility, justice, and the need for every citizen to refuse silence in the face of wrongdoing. She outlined her vision for change: mandatory bias training for every law enforcement officer in the city roads, transparent complaint processes open to the public, and regular community forums where voices long ignored could be heard. "Justice is not served by hiding behind policies," she reminded them, "but by lifting them into the light." Finally, she offered a challenge: "If we remain silent when we see injustice, we become complicit. I stand here today not for myself, but for every person whose story was never told." A ripple of applause rose up, measured at first, then swelling into a genuine ovation. As General Voss stepped back, the gathered crowd carried her words into the waiting world. In that moment, it was clear this was more than a press conference. It was a call to action, an invitation for every American, young and old, to stand up, speak out, and never let injustice go unanswered. In the weeks that followed, Samantha's arrest became a national touchstone for dignity and accountability. Candlelit vigils sprang up in city squares while veterans, nurses, and students shared stories of their own encounters with bias. Bipartisan bills mandating de-escalation and empathy training moved through roads legislatures, and civilian review boards received record funding. Social media campaigns under Dignity for All urged people to speak out against injustice, and local schools held empathy days inspired by her example. Even military bases revamped their own emergency call protocols to protect every service member's rights. Ordinary citizens, postal workers, teachers, retirees now saw themselves as sentinels of respect, stepping forward whenever they witnessed unfair treatment. From Mosswood's dusty lot to the halls of power, one incident ignited a movement to ensure every individual is treated with the honor they deserve. We learn that sometimes silence isn't surrender, but a strategy to gather evidence and set the stage for turning the tide. The message is that every small action and courageous word can ripple out and shift a community's mindset. Now, I want to hear from you. How do you feel about the way this situation was handled, and what lessons have you taken away? When do you predict racial discrimination will finally end in our society? Share your year or decade in the comments. You might spark a conversation that keeps the flame of hope alive for future generations. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. All characters and events are creations of the author and are not intended to reference or criticize any real person. It is designed to raise awareness of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating one another with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose all forms of violence, prejudice, and injustice. Please consider this before viewing.